And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. As always, I'm your host, Derek Havens and Steve Balestrieri. We are both here from PatsFans.com. Want to give a shout out to everyone who's listened to the last couple episodes, hanging through a tough season. We'll get to that in a second. I first want to go ahead and hope everybody listening had a fun, safe, healthy, and happy holiday season. Steve, as always, how you doing, man?
Ah, we're doing good. I mean, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and New Year's Day, and
You're in Florida. Every day's a nice day in the neighborhood.
well, we had a couple of really foggy days in a row. Um, it was so foggy yesterday morning, I thought it was raining. It was that thick. I mean, you
Shout
couldn't
out to
see.
Claire. It seems like a London kind of a day.
Yeah, it did. It did seem like a London type of day, but sun's out today. It's almost 80 degrees out, and
Nice.
we're supposed to get colder next week, but we're enjoying it now. We'll watch some football this afternoon by the pool.
Yep, absolutely. That sounds good. Right in the lanai.
Yeah.
Again, I want to thank everyone for listening live or downloading later on, the podcast or watching on our YouTube channel. If you could please subscribe to us on YouTube or like, share, leave us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Let's get into it. There's a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, not about really the game that just happened or the game coming up, Steve. Honestly, the Patriots obviously lost their Week 17 game to the Chargers, 40-7. Really frustrating game. We'll talk about that for a couple minutes. We'll talk about the Bills game coming up. But I think the real story is, as Steve and I were just talking offline before we went on live, it's really the talking points are going to be about kind of the sub stories of these games, and we'll kind of get to that here. Before we do that, let's start with the Chargers, Steve. Man, I actually thought the Patriots were going to have a chance in this game. I thought they would come out better. It felt like the Chargers. This is going to sound very kind of maybe a loser mentality. I don't know. But I came into the game thinking the Chargers were a good team, not a dominant team. I don't put them in the same class as the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Eagles. I think they're a contending team, but I don't think they're like like a team that's just going to totally roll you. And they made you look like a JV team. And I thought the Patriots just looked really rattled all over. I thought the coaching staff looked like they were outcoached. I thought the offense looked, terrible. I thought Drake May looked really kind of shaken up a little bit. I know Minter, for the defensive coordinator for the Chargers, is very highly regarded, and he came with some schemes and some plays that I think that Drake wasn't prepared for. And I just thought the whole team looked overwhelmed, Steve. That was my biggest takeaway. It was like, wow, they came in here, and this isn't like the high bar of contending. This is the high bar of even getting into the playoff race, and they basically boat raced you, out of your own stadium. So to me, that was the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, after they played the Bills tough last week, we expected better, them coming home and facing a team that frankly isn't as good as Buffalo. But, you know, on any given week, the Chargers are capable of beating anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think Jim Harbaugh, and I keep harping on this, Harbaugh is my choice for coach of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
What about Kevin O'Connell for the Vikings? Just as a
I
quick
think
aside.
he's done a fantastic job. But I look at that Chargers team, and they won. I think it was 5 games last year, and then they lost Mike Williams. They lost
Keenan
Keenan
Allen,
Allen,
Austin Eckler.
Austin Eckler, and everyone was predicting doom and gloom for them. And they're not, as you said, they're not a juggernaut, but boy, they're a tough, football team. They've taken on, the image of their coach, and I
I
think
want to circle back to that point, by the way. Sorry to interject, but I want to circle back to that point when we get to the Gerard Mayo discussion later,
Yeah,
because I do think
and
that's
you know
important
what?
because they
You
do
know,
take on their head coach's personality and his kind of mantra.
yeah, and you know, I've always been a fan of Harbaugh's. I just think, I have a lot of a lot more respect for him than I do for his brother. I just I don't know. His brother always seems like a whiner to me, but he's been a coach for a long time in
I
the
think his
NFL.
brother's a bitch, to be honest, but I do think he's a good coach. But
Oh, he's an excellent coach,
yeah,
and
but
but
but you know,
I've always liked Jim.
one brother is more likable than the other. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, much more so. And he's just he's one of those guys. He took over, and they went from 5-11 to a contender, even after losing all that offensive firepower. And I think Justin Herbert's been so much better for it. Yeah,
Mm.
his touchdown numbers are down, but his interceptions are way down.
I think those will get better though. I mean, Herbert is what I mean, obviously you want Drake May to be, the best quarterback ever or in the league or whatever, but I think Herbert's a good comp if you want him to kind of hit a ceiling. I think Herbert still has a long way to go before he can hit his ceiling, but I think he's really kind of dialing in some of the I think he's getting into a pro style offense with an actual professional head coach, and you can see him going through the progressions, making some good throws. He missed a couple throws this week, 100%. But he made some dime throws, and he shows you the kind of arm talent he has. It's really impressive, from a Charger standpoint. Obviously, defensively, I thought they really kind of mixed things up, spun the dial a little bit on May, and he looked flustered. Last week he was flustered, but this week he was really kind of it looked like he was going through a little bit of like, oh, this is a totally different thing than I was expecting, the kind of rookie moment. And those are going to happen. And that's okay. And that's a good learning experience, honestly. But it is a little frustrating to see them kind of do those things to you because they put you on your head a little bit.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I look at this game,
Mhm.
and you know, and I'm like, games against teams like this that have two excellent edge rushers, all of the warts of your tackles just become so much more brighter. You know what I mean? It
Mm.
just explodes on you how bad they are. When you look at team, they have Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, and uh, I won't even say they took them to school. They picked them up by the seat of their pants and kicked their butts across the playground.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Um, let's kind of we know, let's be honest, anyone who's listening to the show or watching the show, we know where the Patriots record is and kind of where their fate lies. We know they're not a playoff team. We know they're circling the top pick of the draft. But let's kind of we're going to get to the draft conversation here in a little while. Unfortunately, we have to do that, but it is what it is. But before we get to that, Steve, I really want to make the coaching standpoint. I really want to make that a topic of conversation because it felt like I know Gerard's a rookie head coach. I don't want to be too hard on him, okay? But it looked like he got pantsed in this game, like 100%. Like just an old school pantsed elementary school style. What are your thoughts on that? And then I have a couple of follow-ups for you.
Well, again, I think you said it correctly. He got pants by Jim Harbaugh, who, I just finished on a rant, calling for him to be the coach of the year. And it was easy to see the difference. Mayo is a rookie head coach. He has rookie coordinators, and it is what it is. I mean, anyone who watched that game can't sit there and say that they weren't way behind in the coaching standpoint in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we know the warts on this roster, and there are many. and it's tough for Mayo. And I will be fair with this. I mean, he inherited the worst roster in the NFL.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking roster to roster. We knew going into the game the Chargers roster was superior to the Patriots roster. We hadn't a lot of, I would say the vast majority of us, I guess me being the minority, the vast majority would be that the Chargers were going to probably roll through the Patriots. I didn't expect 40-7. I'm not saying that the vast did. I thought the Patriots were going to win by a touchdown. I thought they had a good chance to be competitive. It really wasn't competitive. At all. And I think coaching in this game was blaring through the whole thing.
Yeah, I thought they were going to be close. I mean,
yeah,
I picked the Chargers to win, but I thought it would be a close game. They would give a great effort and play like they did in Buffalo, which kept the score close. I mean, the defense, I thought last week against the Bills looked the best that it has pretty much all season. They kept Allen under wraps. Yeah, they
pretty much aside from the Bengals game, and honestly, that one.
First game of the year, you could throw out either way.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. But you know what I mean.
Good or bad. I mean, that's why the first NFL game of the year is so hard to predict because there's so many variables going in, and a lot of teams aren't really ready yet. And, we saw that the Bengals weren't ready, to start that early. And they got gashed in the run in that game, So, you could throw those games out. Not that I'm saying they didn't deserve to win. They did in that game. They outplayed them. But, I throw that one out, first game of the year. But I thought the defense, in Buffalo was the best we saw it all year.
Right.
And we expected that kind of effort, and it wasn't there on Saturday.
Well, let's close the book on the Chargers game because there's really not much more to say. Honestly, I'm sure people who are listening, I think everyone feels the same way. I think people were kind of hoping for a win just because they want to go ahead and see something, but there was no juice, there was no life. It's been the same different day, But I think to me, the coaching standpoint, it's funny. There's so many national people, like the Adam Schefters of the world, and even like TV analysts. Like the talking point is like, oh well, the Patriots want to stick with Gerard Mayo unless it's terrible down the stretch. Like, how can it get worse than what we've seen down the stretch? Like, look at the last couple of weeks. I mean, they have been outcoached every single week. We know the talent gap is going to be different. I'm sorry, 40-7 is not acceptable. Do not tell me that's an acceptable coaching gap or talent gap. That is a coaching gap as well. And if you watch that game and even have an inkling of what football should be, how it should be played, you're sitting there saying, man, I was just talking as a personal aside, I was talking to my cousins and they were talking about Mayo and everything. And I've been pretty steadfast on being like, it'd be a really bad look for the Crafts to fire Mayo after 1 year. I don't think there's any chance it happens. I'm sorry. After last week's game and the way it's played out the last couple of weeks, I don't think it's crazy to throw it out there that they say, hey, mea culpa. We effed up. Like we made a mistake. We like Gerard, but we need to go in a different direction. And you hire someone like Mike Vrabel or whoever else that can bring in people who are a little bit more established. Like they gave the keys to Mayo, and we didn't expect him to go around the turn, but he crashed into the wall. So it's like I just don't know what you do, Steve, because to me it's just like you have so many fundamental issues, and it's like, where do you start? Do you want to go in and go into a second year and say, hey, Mayo's going to get better? Like, do I personally think Mayo's going to get better from in year 2 than year 1? Yes. Do I have any confidence he's going to be a good head coach? I thought at the beginning, yeah, he might have a good chance, but I'm not going to lie. I'm a little shaken right now by it because there's been a lot of stuff that's happening that I feel like are fundamental issues.
Exactly. And, when you're looking at I know a lot of people, they were chanting the fire Mayo
Mm-hmm.
thing, on Saturday. And it was audible on TV and on the radio. As you know, I mute the television because I like listening to Bob Sosi and Zoe,
Of course.
because they know the team better. So when they're talking about matchups and whatnot, and I think they have a better feel. And it's not a
Well,
knock
they're
on.
both around the team a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a knock on the national guys. It's just they know better.
But
Because
but just even that, even that, like for a reference point, like say Ross Tucker or Ian Eagle or any of these commentators that come in, they have the production meetings. Scott Zolak has that 2 or 3 times a week throughout the entire season for
yeah,
like 6 months. So
yeah,
when Scott Zolak says something, it's yeah, he has his opinions, and sometimes they're not like team fed. But like, and I'm not saying he's Mike Reese, but when Scott says something, you should listen to it because he has more insight than most people do inside that building.
and he was a quarterback
Yeah,
in
and
the NFL.
put
So
aside he was actually a quarterback in the NFL, but yeah.
yeah, so I mean, when you're talking about a depth of knowledge, and Ross Tucker played in the NFL as well. I mean, he was a tight end. I
He's
think.
turned into a really good commentator too.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. It's not a knock on them guys, but anyway,
No, yeah, that wasn't the point. But go ahead.
back to the thing. I mean, the fire Mayo chance. Looking at it, it's a bad look for Kraft. However, this plays out, I think, because if they say, "Hey, look, we're going to stick with Gerard Mayo and the coaching staff
Keep pulling
in
at
the
this
front
thread.
office because we feel like they're going to be exponentially better," people aren't going to buy that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do that, then what happens 4 or 5 games into next year if things are falling apart again and they didn't hit it out of the park in free agency and in the draft, and they're not getting better, they're kind of treading water to where they are right now.
They're in almost a lose-lose situation. Pretty much no
Exactly.
matter what. The only
because
way, Steve,
because if you
the
stick
only
with Mayo,
way. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
if you stick with Mayo, well then I know that there's a lot of love for Mike Vrabel in the building.
Mm-hmm.
The Patriots traded for him during the first Super Bowl run. He turned out to be a fantastic player. When he got to be an everyday guy, and talk about versatile. I mean, he caught, I think it was 11 touchdown passes from Tom Brady
Every
and
single
11 catches.
every single target,
That's a
every
pretty,
single target was a completion. Every single completion was a touchdown.
yeah, that's a pretty good ratio. Um,
Not bad.
and I think he was a very, very good coach with the Tennessee Titans. And I know some people are pushing back on that, saying, well, he wasn't a great coach. Well,
No, I disagree.
hey, look, he took them to an AFC championship game, and
Mm-hmm.
they never had a quarterback. I mean,
his comments when he was inducted to the Patriots Hall of Fame, he told Patriots fans, well, the crowd, so basically Patriots fans, media, etc., right? He said, like, hey, cherish this organization. Not every place is like this. And that he was with the Titans then currently. And when
yeah,
he went back to talk to the owners of the Titans, like when he went back to the organization and he went back to go do his job, they fired him like 2 days later. Basically, from what I've heard, he basically met with I forget the woman's name. I want to say it was Amy Shrunk or something like that, or something like that. I'm sorry. I'm sure I can look it up. We're just talking live, which is what we do. But the woman who owns the Titans, like from what I understand, he got there. Their back was up about the comment that he made. Like every place is like this, winning organization XYZ, and they fired him. And it was like a 2-minute meeting. Like from what I heard, it was literally like, "Hey, you're relieved." Fired, get out. And he was like, okay, I'm good. And he walked out, and he wants to come. There's been a lot of reports about him wanting to go to the Patriots then, and he wants to now. The question is, what do the Crafts do? And again, to your point, it's like, okay, you fire Gerard, you hire Mike Vrabel. We just talked about a lose-lose situation. If you do that, people are going to say, well, you hired the wrong guy in the first place, and there's Mike. And I think people would be happy about making a change and someone who is beloved like Mike Vrabel. But then if he doesn't win, at least, I don't know, make him more competitive 6 or 7 games next year. If he's not, then all of a sudden people are going to be really turning on ownership even more than they are. If they went really drastic, which I think there's almost no percentage of, and they go hire like a Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions. Well, he has no ties to the organization. So it's like, hey, people are expecting like prolific offense. If there's not, it's going to fire back on them again. So it's like, what do you do? I don't know what that, like how that conversation goes. I think the Krafts have painted themselves in a corner with Mayo. And I think the only way out is to hope and pray that Mayo has a better year too. And if not, then you try to make up some excuse. But
right. But see, the issue with that is if they're in the same boat, after 4 or 5 games next year.
Oh, it's going to get worse.
Then Ben Johnson, Vrabel, those guys are gone because they're going to get hired. They're going to get hired by somebody.
I'm scared. I'm scared Vrabel's going to go to the Jets. That's the last thing I want.
I think
he's a good coach.
I don't think he would go to the Jets just because of the ownership there.
Yeah. I think Woody Johnson has painted a certain image of the organization, the owner of the Jets, for those that don't know.
I think Rex Ryan will probably end up going back there.
God, I hope so. I miss those press conferences. That would be awesome on so many levels. And to give Rex credit, he did do a pretty good job at at certain aspects. He did a really good job. I just think there's a fine line of having your players foaming at the mouth and excitement and energetic, and also having the locker room being torn apart, which we saw literally happen with his regime the first time.
Yeah, what happens with Rex, and we know how the New York media is. They loved Rex at the beginning. He was bombastic. He was like
not here to kiss Belichick's rings.
Yeah, all of that stuff. I mean, he was so quotable, and they were winning. When they stopped winning, the media turned on him and, as they say, a New York second. But that's for another time. I think Rex is going to go back to the Jets. That could change. But if I'm the Patriots now, you kind of want to stick with the guy you brought in because you said you've been wanting to hire him for 5 years. Do you want to admit you made a mistake there? And then, you run the risk of losing a guy like Vrabel or maybe even a Ben Johnson.
Let me ask you right now. I'm going to put you on the spot, Steve, and I do this once a show, so I'm sorry to do this to you. And as always, I will always give you the out to defer to me because I'm asking the questions and I'll answer too. I'm not asking Robert or Jonathan Kraft. I'm asking Steve Balestrieri. Would Mayo be back for a second year, or what would you do?
Vrabel.
Yeah, me too. I think to me, I would sit down and say to Mayo, I'd say, look, you can be a part of the organization in some capacity if you feel comfortable, but things just have not transpired, well, not only on the field, but I think there's been some comments that I'd like to kind of circle back to that are a little upsetting. I think his press conferences haven't come off great. So I think it's been a little on and a little off the field. When I say off the field, I don't mean like arrests or anything like that. I'm just talking about media comments. I'm just, how you're perceived. Perception is very important, especially when you're a billion-dollar organization. I think Vrabel has more experience at different levels, different places, probably has some more connections. I think he just would carry what I think when I think of Vrabel, I think of someone who could be like his next coaching stint, I think could be a decade, like one of those kind of guys. Mayo, I think the reason I'm scared of Mayo, and I'll go back to you after this. The reason I'm scared of Mayo is that I'm scared it's going to be kind of what you laid out not too long ago, where you bring Mayo back because you feel like you have to because you only gave him 1 year. You watch the parade go by. Vrabel goes to somewhere. Ben Johnson goes to somewhere. XYZ. Mayo comes back, and then all of a sudden you are 2-6 to start next year, or 1-4, and then the Mayo chants come back. And if you're the Crafts, I've already talked about how I'm worried about the season ticket renewals in February. Those chants come back, and you're really in bad shape. Like you were in bad shape as Bill was leaving, but you held on to it because it was still Bill, and then he left because you got rid of him because he did a bad job with the roster, and no matter how good of a coach you can only do so much. Then you go ahead and you make the coaching change, and you're saying like he's the guy, and then you fall in your face. I mean, they're like 2 or 3 plays. Yeah, they 2 or 3 plays from probably winning another game or two. They're also 2 or 3 plays from being 1-15, like literally. So I just feel like you're in a really bad spot if you're them, and you really need to make it. So to me, it'd be Vrabel. I just think he brings a little bit more confidence in the organization.
Yeah, I read something yesterday. And now I'm drawing a blank on where it came from, but somebody was mentioning John Gruden teaming up with Drake May. I don't know if they would do that, but that it'd be fun to think about that and talk about it.
Well, John Gruden is with Barstool Sports now, and he was on with a couple of guys. I want to say Portnoy and
Maybe
Big
that's where
Cat
I
were
read
there. And it was a video. I didn't read the article. There was a video, and I think it was Portnoy. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but I know Big Cat was. I know I can see the screen in my head, but I know Big Cat was in the back, and he's a big Bears fan. And so Gruden was asked Caleb Williams or Drake May, and without hesitation, almost before this question was asked, Gruden goes, Drake May is going to be a star, man. Like that's basically what he said, paraphrasing, of course. I'm sure there's video somewhere. And so I wouldn't be surprised if I can see the connection, there, but I can't see the connection between Gruden and the organization per se. I just think that'd be a tough one to go. I think to me, Steve, as much as people want Ben Johnson, and that might be fun, I don't see how it's either not. If you fire Mayo, it's got to be Vrabel in my mind. I just think that's the only way. Or you just stick with Mayo for one more year and you see how it goes. And if it's just as bad, if not worse, then you see who's available next year.
Yeah. The dark horse in this, if they do decide to make a change,
can I guess?
Brian Flores.
I wanted to guess. That's what I was going to guess. I was going to guess. I was like, that would be the dark horse, but I would put that I'd put him at like 0.5%, 1%. I'd put Mayo at probably 75, and I'd put Vrabel as the vast majority of the rest, and then maybe a sliver for Flores. But I think it's more likely to be Flores than Ben Johnson. I just don't see them doing that. That would be such a drastic move, to go from moving on from Bill, hiring someone who you just exuded confidence in, put all your support behind, getting rid of him, and then going someone outside the organization who apparently is going to be one of the highest paid head coaches in the league. I just would be stunned by that development. That would be shocking.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I'm going to sit here and say, never say never, because we don't know what's going on inside the building.
Well, let's pause that because I want to go back to what's going on inside the building, but let's take a quick break for podcast purposes. And we come back, let's talk about what's going on inside the building because there's been some interesting comments lately. We'll be back right after this. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Steve Balestrieri, Derek Havens here as always. I want to thank everyone who's listening live and who's listening later. We're recording this on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2025. By the way, I don't think I said Happy New Year, Steve. So cheers to you. I know you had a good evening, and we got some stuff around the house done. We talked about that earlier. I had some great ribs last night, smoked on the grill. It was awesome. So that was fun. But let's get back to something we just talked about before the break, which was essentially, what's going on inside the building. So a couple different things. I'll leave the player's name out of it, and I've referenced this before. I spoke to someone who, was newer to the organization, who thought that the Mayo change was going to be for the better, who thought that his communication and the way things were laid out was much better for the players, and they were happy about it. Okay. We all talked about the player report that went around league wide about the team on so many different levels. Patriots got some bad grades on that, so that was kind of, an aspect. Mayo was, not only a player, a pretty successful one, Super Bowl champion, first round draft pick, top 10 pick, went to a very good school, go Vols. There's a lot of good things about what Mayo did, had some business sense, kind of went from like a CEO, kind of persona coming in here. Obviously, big shoes to fill. I think anyone was expecting him to fill Bill's shoes in year one. I think that would be incredibly short-sighted and unfair. Of all the things, that you could question him about, I think that would be incredibly unfair. But there's been some comments, Steve, that have really rubbed me the wrong way, and I want to get your take on them. Dietrich Weiss talked about how the Patriots fans have been spoiled. I'm not going to bring up the quote. I can in a second while you give your answer, and I can kind of circle back to it. Keon White's also been a guy who's been pretty boisterous too. I thought Phil Perry, who was a guest on 98.5 as during the midday show, as a guest when, over, the holidays, Phil Perry got the story, and he's the one who put it out there for, NBC Boston. And I thought that I thought Phil laid it out right, and it was like, I appreciate Keon White. He was someone who wasn't afraid to, put a comment out there and not take it back. He was kind of taking accountability and also being like, hey, I got to play better. It's on me. It's not on me to coach myself, which I know that was a big radio topic. I think the way he said it, if you listen to how he said it, I think it made a lot of sense. He was basically saying, like, I need to do my job better. I need to fit into the scheme better. He was saying it's not my job to evaluate, myself, which I think is all fair. I think the Wise comment to me, that one rubbed me actually more the wrong way about fans being spoiled. And I get he was trying to back his head coach and, all that. But look, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, Patriots fans have been spoiled. It's been 5 years, and there's been a lot of turbulence. And it's not like they're just not good enough in losing, Steve. To me, they're not good enough, and there's a lot of bad decisions being made. We're talking about, letting Tom Brady walk. Obviously debatable. We talked about that ad nauseum a couple of years ago. The Bill Belichick decision. Some people are still upset about that. Whatever. There was hiring Mayo. There was Elliott Wolf not going outside for the front office. There's been a lot of decisions, and unfortunately, the product is just watered down. So to me, for Dietrich Wise, I'd say, yeah, Patriots fans have been spoiled in the past. But now we've been on several years of basically we're watching a sinking ship. And we're saying, hey, the obvious answer is A, B, and C, but they're doing D, E, and F. That's just how I feel. How do you feel about those comments?
Yeah, and again, look, we were spoiled. 9 Super Bowls in 18 years.
6 and
how
20.
How could you not be? Okay. So, fans now have very high expectations for the team. I thought David Andrews the other day handled it best. And he was asked straight up, do you like, hearing the fans boo the team? And he was like, no, but they pay good money to come see us play football at a very high level, and they have the right to voice their opinion.
Right. Which I think is the appropriate response.
Yeah. I think that was a great way of putting it. However, it's been 5 years now. And granted, that first year, I think Brady leaving in 2020, I think they really thought he would stay. So it took them by surprise, and they did the best that they could they
I
got
think there's
Cam.
an argument to be made they got lucky. I think there's an argument to be made that they got lucky that COVID happened during that year and that fans weren't in the stadium for that year, because
Yeah,
I think it would have happened sooner. As bad as it is now, I think it would have the clock would have been turned back a whole other year for that if fans were in the stadium. But I think everyone kind of washed that year away as like, hey, we got a pandemic going on, and okay, if we have to see Cam Newton throw the ball into the ground 66% of the time, then so be it.
but and I like Cam. I mean, I
Yeah, no
thought,
knock on Cam. It's fine. I mean,
and I thought he handled everything. That's what kind of made it okay. I mean, he didn't play well,
no,
but
he had a couple of nice throws, but
his
he was
attitude.
always accountable though, and he was
Yes,
friendly.
he was so accountable that it kind of made it okay because, hey, look, it was a COVID year. The whole country was upside down, and then they were surprised by Brady not staying. But after that, look, they drafted Mac Jones. That first year, I thought he played really, really well, and then the wheels came off, and it seemed like, instead of, okay, yeah, we're retooling, we're going this way, it started trending really badly downward. And we thought last year was rock bottom, and this year they've continued to dig. So it's not getting better. And, I'm looking at it. I mean, they have a ton of money to spend.
Mm-hmm.
And right now they have the number one draft pick, which, I certainly hope. And I know everyone wants Travis Hunter, and I
Not me, but I'm
yeah,
not
but
not a knock against Travis. I think
right.
he's a good player, but it's a
No,
bad draft. But I would
he's
go a
a
different direction.
fantastic two-way player,
Yeah,
you
of course.
know. But if I'm the GM right now, I revel in having that number one pick because I'm gonna get a lot more draft picks for that number one guy, and I don't have to slide back very far.
But unfortunately for the team, and this is just the reality of the situation. Unfortunately for the Patriots right now, if they were to lose, on Sunday, and we're going to get to that to close out the show, if they were to lose on Sunday and secure that number one overall pick, if this was the last year where you have a potentially prolific quarterback draft, I mean, literally just one of the best in recent memory. If this was last year and the Patriots had the first pick and they already had Drake May, like if they already had their guy and there was a bunch of quarterbacks available, they could get a king's ransom. I mean, they could end up with a guy like Malik Neighbors and future picks, for years, and they could be totally set. Unfortunately, it's not like that right now. I mean, everyone has their, we'll get to the draft talk later, like Shador Sanders and Cam Ward, and there's pros and cons to both for different reasons. And if the Patriots end up with the first pick, they can probably still go ahead and maneuver a little bit, but it's not like that this year. And unfortunately for the team, I mean, we talked about this on the last show. Outside of quarterback, and maybe running back and maybe like one or two other positions, like for the most part, you could pretty much convince me for them to take the best player at almost any position. Just take a good player. They just need a blue chip prospect. But there's not like a Jonathan Ogden, at tackle. There's not a Quentin Nelson at guard. There's not an Ed Reed at safety, a Larry Fitzgerald, a Darrelle Revis. And don't tell me that like if you want to say like Travis Hunter's the best player in the draft and you want to take him, I won't tell you you're wrong. I just think that in most years, I don't think he'd be the number one pick. I think he'd be a high pick. I just don't think he'd be the number one overall pick. Even going into the draft talk, I guess prior to the season.
He's a first rounder, but not the number one.
No, but he'd still be he's a Heisman Trophy winner, a terrific college player. I still think he will do well in the NFL, but I do think he's a little bit of a projection, and we'll circle back to that on a different show. But like even going into the draft talk, Steve, this year, we talked about 3-4 tackles being like blue chip guys. And there's a lot of questions about all of them for different reasons. Will Campbell's arm length, Kelvin Banks, great in the run game. How is he in pass pro? Go from there. But it's like, what are you going to do? So it'd be easy if there was just like this, like blue chip prospect, like so easy to be like,
Right.
yep, he's going to be a
If there
stud.
was a Brock Bowers, right, in this
Then
one,
just take him. Then just take him.
yeah.
It's like just take the best player. But now they're in a weird position, and we really can't have that conversation until a couple things happen. For one, until we know what happens this coming week, and for two, free agency, which will always mix things up. Those two things will mix up things a little bit, and then we'll obviously have the draft conversation before free agency, of course, because we got months to fill. But that's going to be a factor too. But next week is going to change a couple things one way or the other.
And when it comes to free agency, they have to kind of break the rules. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
They have to overpay this year. I think they have to overpay by quite a bit because, I know everyone's talking about T. Higgins. Well, granted, he'd be playing with Drake May. But, if T. Higgins is looking around and he sees the roster as it is, does he want to come to New England? Probably not. So you're going to have to kind of sweeten the pot for him to where he's like, for that kind of money, I'll take a shot that you guys are going to rebuild really quickly. And again, we're talking maybe a 3-year deal for $96-97 million. Which
Easy. I think you're offering T. Higgins, 3 years, 96, 4 years, 120, 128, something like that,
because
like
at
32 million
25,
a year.
if he gives the Patriots 3 years,
He's going to hit
he's
the bank.
still
Yeah,
only 28 years old.
Yeah, 2029.
And if things don't work out, then
He
he's
can go
like,
wherever.
yeah, he's still a young guy.
Mm-hmm. That's what I would do. I mean, if I was him, but
yeah, I mean,
the difference,
now,
thing though for the Patriots this year compared to last year, Steve, is that last year we were saying who wants this Patriots job. This year I think it's a little different. I think most people, and you're seeing different video clips of players on opposing teams, praising Drake May. I think we've all seen Drake May and what we think he can be. You're seeing a stud corner. You're seeing a good quarterback potentially as your block. You're seeing a team that needs a lot of stuff, but you're at a big time market and a big fan base with the most cap room in the league by a mile and potentially a first overall pick. It's now, to me, a very attractive head coaching spot. And now, to me, that's why it makes the Kraft conversation, going back to earlier in the show, that makes the Kraft discussion a little more interesting when you add those factors in. It's crazy how much a difference 1 year makes.
Yeah, and again, if you're building a football team, I think you need a really good head coach, you need 4 players, right? You need a franchise quarterback, which they have. You need a stud cornerback, which they have. The other 2 pieces of the puzzle, what they don't have, is a stud left tackle and a stud edge rusher. If you have all 4 of those pieces in place, you can build around your football team, easily around that because you have those guys in place. 2 of those they don't have right now. And let's face it, with $132 million, they need to find the best players they can. No more bargain basement stuff because Bill was always great at that. He could find a guy that fit what he needed him to do. And people would say, well, they're not blue chippers. But, these guys would always come in and play fantastic. Kyle Van Noy, who's still playing at a really high level right now for the Ravens.
Yep.
I mean, guys like him, he was a bust in Detroit. He came here. He helped them win some Super Bowls. He's still playing real good. But they need those stud guys, those Khalil Macks and whatnot. Joey Bosa, that type of player.
All right, Steve. Let's see what else we had. Yannick Ngakoue got released. Not crazy. Let's talk about a couple of the veterans around the league. I mean, as you and I talked, and you pointed out to me before the show, which I agreed with. Some people were like, "Oh, well, Yannick got because of his personal foul this last week, he was released because of that. No, I don't think that's it at all. I think they realized where they are and what he could add to a team out making a playoff run. I think it's the same thing for Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys and why he got released and why Jerry Jones did that. I think it's just about sometimes you just want to do the right things for veterans, at this stage of the year. I think that's the same way that some veterans are released, as Bill has done 100 times over the last 20 years, releasing guys early on in training camp where he feels like, hey, there's some young guys who we think could get some valuable reps. You might as well go ahead and try to latch on somewhere else. We're doing you a courtesy for your hard work and dedication to the team. And I'm not talking about just a Patriot standpoint, Steve. I'm talking league wide. I think this is a lot to do about nothing.
Yeah, because every clip I saw about Ngakwe being released, it said, well, he committed a personal foul against Justin Herbert on Saturday. That had nothing to do with that. It was like, look, there's one game left in a really, really bad season. They're doing a veteran solid by the guy. Look, somebody might need some depth at the last minute, making a deep playoff run, and they could use a guy that's, a veteran who's had a lot of success at one time in the league. Not that he did with New England, but it's okay. That was what all that was about. I don't think it had anything to do with him committing.
Right. No, I totally agree. I guess I kind of want to circle over to the Bills, Steve, and talk about not the game. We're not doing, for those who are listening for the first time and for those who've listened for, previous shows over the last couple of years or recently. Normally when we have a game coming up, we would talk about matchups, initial thoughts. We talk about, kind of some, our keys to how the Patriots could win the game, our prediction for the score and kind of final thoughts and kind of go through that whole, rigmarole. Not going to be the case this week, Steve. I don't care if the Patriots win this game. I'm going to ask you a simple question. Would you rather the Patriots win to kind of carry momentum into the offseason, or would you rather them lose and secure the first round pick? I believe that they can possibly drop to the 4 overall pick if they lose. I think that's the farthest they can go. I think they're either going to be 1 to 4, depending on how it all falls out. Do you factor that in at all? Do you want the win, or what's your thoughts?
I think they win by losing.
Yeah.
This week.
Simply put.
I think, look, we wanted the last quarter of the season to go a certain way and have them, play hard, play well down the stretch and build some momentum into next year. Well, they crapped the bed in Arizona. They looked really good for a lot of the game against Buffalo. Then they crapped the bed completely at home against the Chargers. So we're not gaining anything, against the Bills JV team. What if they do? It means nothing going into next year. I would rather them sit Drake May for this entire game, because the last thing you want in a meaningless, week 18 game is for him to get seriously injured. And then you're looking at possibly losing him for all of next year.
So to me, some people say the worst thing that you could do is win this game. I disagree. It's what you just said. To me, the worst possible outcome of this game is Drake May getting hurt and him, of course you could look at him missing a lot of next year or partially next year or whole year, whatever. I don't want Drake May going into year 2 focusing his offseason on rehab. I want him to be in the weight room, in the playbook, working with his guys, going through his tape, focusing on that stuff. That, to me, is the worst possible thing. I would bench, Steve, if I was the Patriots, I would bench May, Stevenson, Hunter Henry, Onwenu. I'd consider kind of Keon White and Christian Gonzalez and probably Kyle Duggar. I know Duggar hasn't had a good last couple of weeks, but they just signed him to a big extension. He's going to be around. I don't think he's totally healthy. I would save a couple of those guys and just say, hey, we're shutting it down for the last week. We don't need it. I don't think you need to start Jacoby Brissett. I would start Joe Milton.
Yes.
And I would start Joe, and I think you could give him valuable reps versus backups as he kind of progresses and you see what you have with him. I think you could start someone like Jaheim Bell at tight end, see what you have in him. Start some of your interior young offensive linemen that you have. Start your young, whoever it is. Give me Isaiah Bolden as your number one cornerback. I don't need to see Christian Gonzalez anymore.
He didn't even practice yesterday.
I know, but you know what I mean. I'm talking kind of general.
I totally agree with that because we just talked about this off season. If Drake May was to be seriously injured on
talk about salt on the wound. I mean, that would be
no
nice stick in the back.
It would be an utter disaster for the off season.
Yep.
When you're trying to bring in free agents, now your quarterback is injured seriously, possibly missing a whole another. No, absolutely not. And we talked about the Patriots. The Bills are going to do the same thing. Now, Sean McDermott mentioned the other day that the consecutive game streak for Josh Allen is very important to him for a couple of reasons. That he wants to show his teammates that he's always there for them. But McDermott, also said that he's going to be in there for a very short amount of time. So he'll probably get one series and that'll be it. And
if that's really the case and the game doesn't really mean much to them, honest to God, Steve, what I would do is I would start Josh Allen, have him run the ball, and then I would call the timeout and then put, Mitch Trubisky in there. And that would be the end of it for me. I wouldn't even go a whole series. I would just say, here's a running play, ISO up the middle, and call it a day.
Let him take 2 snaps, handing the ball off, and that's it. Because
need the ball for all I care.
The last thing you need, again, they're locked into number 2. They can't go higher. They can't go lower. They're locked into 2. So why risk injuring Josh Allen, who's had such an incredible year?
I think he's the MVP.
I think the Bills will be doing that as well. And it's going to have a preseason feel to it. That's
a really good way to put it. It's going to have a preseason feel to this game. Unfortunately for the NFL, I think a lot of the games around the league are going to have that kind of feel to it this week.
Yeah, and we're used to that. I mean, when Bill was coaching the team, he said football players play, but I never really agreed with that because I was, especially during Brady's tenure, I was always holding my breath in that last game of the year because usually they had the number 1 seed locked up.
And they would have the first round bye. So it was that tightrope walk, right? Where you're like, okay, well, do you want them to sit this game, then be off next week? Then they're not playing for 3 weeks, or they come out slow or rusty. Do you want to play them a half and then rest everyone? I do think that's definitely a debate piece, but this to me is non-debatable for the Bills and the Patriots. Like if you're the Bills, there's no rhyme or reason why you would have certain guys play the whole game. And for the Patriots, what are you going to do?
I wouldn't have Shakir in there either.
Oh, I wouldn't either. I mean, I'd bench most of the starters. Kincaid and Knox and
I know it'll suck for the people that are going to the game that want to see these players, but it is what it is, and I totally understand why the coaches feel that way. I mean, you don't need anybody getting hurt in the last game of the season.
No, 100%. And again, for the Patriots, to me, it's just like, I just don't see, if you're looking at like positive in, negative out, what's the pro of Drake May playing the whole game versus the Bills backups in a meaningless game after you've seen him throughout the season? To me, the biggest thing would be him coming out healthy. So I just would not play him, and then look at that other rookie quarterback that you have that again, it is backups, but it is a glorified preseason game. So go ahead and give him that time.
Yeah, but
So
he hasn't had a regular season snap this year.
mm-hmm.
And you're trying to develop him into the your backup for 2025. This would be a good way to get his feet wet in a real NFL game, because the Bills might have some of their starters on defense play a series or two, because they can't rest everybody. You know what I mean? There's just not that many players.
Have you watched any of the in-season Hard Knocks by chance?
No, I haven't.
So I just started it. I don't know if it's totally done or whatever, but I just finished the second episode, and they're doing the whole AFC North thing. So they're doing all 4 teams in the AFC North. Really cool how they did it. I think it's been good so far. And Shelby Harris, who's a veteran defensive lineman for the Browns, obviously the Browns are out of it. He's talking to the team about how, or at least his position group, talking about how, what this time means, for guys. Because he's like, there's a lot of things where, obviously, like, they're not in the playoffs, but he's like, this is also about your career, your livelihood. You're trying to put good film on tape, because right now this is an evaluation period for, by the team on you. And are you are you an addition? Are you someone that they're willing to lose and replace with someone else who becomes available, or someone they want to draft at your position? And I just thought the speech he gave was really, really, really intuitive, and really, I just thought it was really kind of like self-aware, and I thought it was really interesting. I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying, I don't want to be like one of those guys that's like, oh, some of these fans don't realize that. I think a lot of fans, especially those who listen to this show, are well-informed, educated fans. But like at the same time, I do think those kind of things matter. And at this point, to me, it's like, if you're the coaching staff for the Patriots, you know that you're likely going to try to bring Jacoby back as your backup. He probably knows that. Drake, is your future. Okay, so you want to use this game and say, we don't need to see any more Drake or Jacoby. Let's go see what we have in Joe Milton. Do we think how does he look compared to his preseason snaps? Is he worth, being the third quarterback in year 2, or do we need to go back to the pool or circle around that thing? And I'm just using him as one example, right? Jaheim Bell, another example. Is that someone we think we can develop over the offseason? Can he be a potential guy who could be a number 2 tight end, or do we have to go ahead and look at that in the draft or free agency? Again, example. So I think it's critically important from that standpoint.
I think it poses a nice X factor. Him being like the third tight end, he probably works more with Joe Milton than he does with the other 2 quarterbacks.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's definitely doing more special teamwork and emergency stuff.
Yeah, I mean, running the scout team, he probably gets a lot of play in that. And with Joe Milton, maybe they have a little chemistry going. And I agree with you. I would sit Hunter Henry, just because, or maybe let him play again one series just to get, if he wants to reach some milestone that's out there for him, yeah, I'd let him do that for a series or 2, and that'd be about it. But no, I think, I'm intrigued if they play Joe Milton. I would like to see Joe Milton for the entire game. That to me would be so interesting, because, we know he's a big dude. He's very athletic. And he has a cannon for an arm, just like Drake. So,
to me, that makes the most sense. But, any other final thoughts, Steve, as we wrap up the show?
Well, I just, I would like to see, like, Joe Milton play the whole game. I want to see Bell play, if not the whole game, most of it. And look, take your lumps, right? And put, Polk wasn't at practice yesterday, so I don't know what to read into that. But Polk and Baker, let them play the whole game, you
Yeah,
know?
Polk. I wouldn't play Pop. I wouldn't play Kendrick. I would play all the rookies, all the young guys.
Yeah.
I would be Booty, Polk, and Baker, and just kind of let him run. Jaheim Bell. I'd work in literally any rookie you can. That's everybody who's healthy enough. That's who I would play. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
And
We'll
that
have
to me
plenty to
would
talk
be,
about next week.
yeah, that to me would be really interesting. And, it would make it must watch TV for me because, let the young guys play. And, who cares if you lose another one? In fact, we're kind of hoping for a
It'd be
loss here. So,
advantageous. Yeah, of course. I think it'd be more interesting for the team to play all the young guys than for the veterans to play.
yeah.
It's like, what are you going to take
proves
away?
nothing at this point,
Right.
So,
All right. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. We had a good time. Again, I want to wish everyone a happy new year. We recorded this January 1st, 2025. Crazy to say.
Happy New Year.
Yep. And Steve, we'll be doing this next week. As
Well,
always,
we'll look at some playoff matchups and,
yeah.
we'll see if, what the news brings out of Foxborough after the season's over. Because I think
I'm gonna throw you one more curveball to end the show. Okay. What are the chances that Black Monday comes around this coming Monday and Gerard Mayo is fired by the Patriots? Give me a percentage.
I think it's 50-50 right now.
I'm gonna go 30% fired, 70% stays. I think and that's bigger than I would have gone a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I was in the same boat with you. I thought there was 0% chance of that happening. But now, I mean, after last week, I think you start questioning everything.
Even someone like Tony Pelini, who's been around forever covering the league and draft and everything else. I mean, he came out with the story yesterday on New Year's Eve day saying that according to his source that Mike Vrabel wants to be the next coach of the Patriots.
Yeah.
And he's expressed that to the organization.
Yeah. So
it's not just scuttlebutt.
Yeah, they know that's that's kind of a slam dunk if they decide to go that way, that he wants to come here. And
is it fair to say that if Vrabel doesn't become the next head coach, that it's because of the Crafts, not because of Vrabel?
That's a good question. I think when you have a guy that had such a career here, and he's performed well as a coach out outside of here, and he really wants to come back to this organization. You don't have to sell him on the organization at that point.
Right.
I think that's more Vrabel. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not selling New England to him. He wants to come here, you know? So I think that's I don't know. I think the Crafts are going to be really hesitant to do anything at this point.
Well, we're going to dive into that next week's show. It'll be interesting. I'm sure we'll get to it early and often. Again, thanks for everyone listening. Please do subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Patriots 4th and 2, or be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. If you can share, leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. For Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. I want to give a shout out to PatsFans.com once again, and we will see you guys next week. Happy New Year.